we now have actually a hybrid contribution. So we've got one person in person and one video from Dissidence. I think maybe we could get Russell to come up here for when we're doing Keaton so that you can have it sort of side by side. You're probably used to that. But yeah, I think Dissidence, they weren't on my radar ahead of this election. And then they took a singly just incredible, strong position. They joined us out in Chicago at the DNC. And we've just been, fighting alongside ever since. And we're really proud to have them here. So yeah, I think you're up first, and then we have Keaton's message. So yeah, welcome, Russell.
Cool. Thank you. People keep asking me where Keaton is. I'm like, Keaton won't go to Connecticut, much less Seattle. Forget about it. I always think of the line in The Godfather. Hey, he could have had his own family. You couldn't get him out of that one meal town. All right, this is going to be maybe not the best opening of a speech today, but it's definitely going to be the dorkiest opening that you're going to hear. The great science fiction writer Frank Herbert, told you, opens his masterpiece with the line, "A beginning is the time for taking the most delicate care that the balances are correct." Why are beginnings delicate? Because they are by their nature unmoored and rootless. Any small thing can destroy an effort at its beginning, whether a novel, a business, a resolution, or a political party. Any distraction, any conflict, any loss of momentum, and it can all evaporate very quickly. Add to that the reality that we must face from this beginning so that we do not, as Shama might say, make illusions. The left is more broken on every level, from the cultural to the intellectual to the spiritual, than it has ever been in my lifetime, and arguably than it has ever been in this country. That is partly through self-inflicted wounds and partly a result of external pressure, sometimes exerted through the kind of infiltration and psychological operations that we now know for certain USAID, NED, the IRI, and many others have been running overseas for decades. It would be naive to think they haven't been running the same kinds of operations here at home. And when we look at the state of the left, we must offer some grudging admiration for the effectiveness of their efforts. We saw the end result of those efforts recently when the DNC offered content creators a cash bonanza by streaming their race for a new chair. The high comedy of this pure distillation of the essence of what the Democratic Party has been reduced to by its Wall Street owners working in tandem with an activist wing that is only allowed to exist precisely because it is ridiculous and ineffective at advocating even for the narrow identitarian issues that are the only issues allowed them by the party's donor class. It was as clear a lesson for activists as Ozymandias in the desert. This once great and powerful political party brought low and yet still there sticking up out of the sands of its own destruction to beg for money. Look on my work, ye mighty, and write a check. This was the final outcome of the Frankenstein's monster experiment of stitching together disparate elements of the civil rights movement, running them through a blender of tortured postmodernism, elevating obscure crackpot academics as spokespeople for the truly repulsive, zero-sum, all against all vision of society that came out the other side, and telling people this was what the left was all about. Not solidarity, identity. Not class, not the hard realities of material conditions. Instead, these ideas were replaced by a secular theology, with the villains often being the workers themselves, who hadn't been educated in the new jargon, and who not only didn't accept and embrace every new sexual and intellectual fetish of the ruling class, but often had the temerity to openly question them. As it turns out, polyamory is not a politics, and the hunt for microaggressions is no substitute for the hunt for better wages and free health care. And so the Democrats have not only fallen, hollowed out from the inside by the same narcissists and neurotics they let in to explain the purpose of their continued existence as a party after they sold out their old working class base, they have turned over the country to a re-energized Christian right that's going to end up making the Reagan Revolution look like Woodstock. This is where we are, and it should serve as a cautionary tale for any who are going to attempt to recover the lost power and reputation of the left. A political movement can survive hatred and hostility, but one thing it cannot survive is the perception that it is ridiculous. And by mistaking the need for tolerance with the need for indulgence, by confusing the mission of helping victims with the celebration of victimhood, by treating strength as a vice and incapacity as a virtue, not only the establishment left, but a good portion of the activist left has come to make itself look ridiculous. Any movement that indulges these ideas will end up being an enormous waste of time and money for all involved. The first person who wants to form a sub-caucus that has nothing to do with improving conditions for all workers should be, if not canceled and rejected, lest we become the same censorious prigs we condemn, given a firm talking to and a very clear and unambiguous refusal, so that the organization doesn't end up like the DNC or the DSA or countless other attempts at focusing the energies of the left, devoured from within by people whose only purpose is to divide and weaken. For a left that's gone 40 some odd years without a serious union presence in its councils or any real connection to laborers and tradesmen who may not think the way they do on every issue, repairing that relationship and reestablishing that connection is going to take a lot of humility and a serious course correction. This weekend, there is an opportunity to create a new vision that begins to repair the damage done by the Clinton ascendancy and the neoliberal politics it ushered in. We are fortunate to have so many talented people join in to help, including our many peers in the indie media space who have come together today to both appear on the live stream and to create a collective super stream of the event. And to lead the way forward, we couldn't have a better person than Shama, who is that rarest of things in this foul year of our Lord 2025, a leftist that wins things. As one of our viewers recently said, Shama is ride or die. She has won tangible victories for workers against the corrupt Democrats and the oligarchy they serve. Shama has beaten the Leviathan that is Amazon, both imposing a local tax and the first $15 minimum wage in the country. And how did she do it? By inviting everyone into the tent, without elevating or denigrating any below or above the others. That is how you win over workers. That is how you build solidarity. That is how you create an alternative in waiting for the moment when the foot soldiers of the MAGA movement, who need to pay rent, see a doctor, take a plane, or collect Social Security like everybody else, come to realize that tech bro billionaires were never coming to save them, only to preside over their final destruction as a class and to dismantle what meager protections they had left from the greed of their own. Thank you.
Hello everyone, my name is Keaton Weiss from Dissidence. I'd have loved to have bought a plane ticket and flown out to be there in person, but for some reason my USAID check hasn't cleared this month. I called the Treasury Department to see what the issue could be, but no one answered. Instead, I got an automated message telling me that they're experiencing unusually high call volumes and that there were 328 white South African farmers ahead of me in the queue. So I never did get to the bottom of it, but in any event, it's a great pleasure to be able to address this conference. Back in May of 2021, during the brief but brutal to endure honeymoon period of the Biden administration, I struggled with how to, or even whether to, continue to engage politically. It was a very strange time when the country, coming out of the COVID lockdowns, seemed eerily content to settle back into the old pre-Trump way of doing things. Order had been restored, democracy had been rescued, of course, and normalcy had been reinstated. Lucky for me, though, despite having fallen into a pretty severe political depression, I had, months prior, committed to be a part of a telethon fundraiser for Shama Sawant's effort against the Democrat-led recall in Seattle. And so in order to not break my commitments, I of course agreed to follow through and show up. And the evening of the fundraiser, I met Shama and her team for the first time over a Zoom call in what was ultimately a 4 to 5 hour event. And for the first time, I saw what, if I'm being honest, I haven't really seen anywhere else at any moment since, which was a group of hardcore leftist activists who had their shit together, who could actually organize and win against the entrenched financial and political interests in Seattle. And win, they did. Shama's team in Seattle pulled me back from the political brink. They kept me from falling into despair at a time when things seemed quite bleak. And today, of course, we find ourselves once again staring out at a political landscape that seems even more unforgiving than the one I just referenced, which is why I can think of no better place to be than here with many of that same team that so inspired me 4 years ago. Now, what makes these times even more difficult than before is that as the right wing amps up their assaults on ordinary people, the discredited liberal class has wrought enormous havoc by tarnishing the brand of noble left causes, tainting them in the minds of the working class. Environmentalism has been hijacked by uber-wealthy do-gooders who lecture the public from Davos, where they flew in on their gas-guzzling private jets. Anti-racism has been given a bad name by a cadre of PMC grifters like Ibram X. Kendi and Robin DiAngelo. The very concept of public health is now a controversial idea, thanks to the lies and mismanagement of a thoroughly corrupt for-profit medical system that destroyed what remained of its reputation these past 5 years since the pandemic struck. And to be frank, liberal elites in and adjacent to the Democratic Party have failed at just about everything these past 8 years or so, except for one thing. They've succeeded in destroying the credibility of the American left by convincing the masses that we are one and the same. This is why the first and most urgent order of business for an emerging left movement is to make crystal clear in the mind of the public that we are not. In order to do this, we must remain laser focused on issues and causes that empower all working people of every race, color, and creed. Well, except for the white South African farmers. Fuck them. But everyone else should have a seat at the table, no matter who they voted for, how they identify, or, very importantly, I think, where they live. Workers from the East Coast to the West Coast, the Rust Belt to the Sun Belt, from the U.S.-Mexico border on down, in the Gaza Strip and in the West Bank. All working people facing subjugation, from wage slavery to human trafficking to ethnic cleansing and genocide, are our class allies and must be treated as such, no matter the ruling class's efforts to divide us against each other. If we stick together, and in the words of our now dear leader, fight, 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 together, we will, like Shama did before and has always done, in the end, win. So it's an honor to speak with you today. Thanks very much.
Please clap.